A lot of older, seasoned restaurant owners truly feel that Gen Z is killing the restaurant industry right now. But not only is that not a fair statement, it's also simply not true. See, Gen Z is not killing restaurants, but Gen Z is quietly changing the way that restaurants get chosen. They don't discover restaurants the same way that previous generations did. They don't evaluate the value that restaurants bring in the same way that previous generations did. And they certainly don't respond to marketing in the same way that previous generations did. In today's video, I want to talk about Gen Z's dining habits, how they choose where to eat, what matters to them beyond price, and what independent restaurants like yours need to know if they want to stay relevant to this audience over the next decade. Let's get into the video. The first thing to realize is that Gen Z does not search, they scroll. So older diners, they may open up Google and search best Italian near me, or they'll read reviews, or they'll compare menus. Gen Z approaches this a little bit differently. They scroll TikTok. They scroll Instagram. They might watch a short video. They look at visuals before text. They discover their world visually, not verbally. So what does that mean? Well, it means that your written descriptions matter a lot less to this particular audience than your visible experience online. If your restaurant does not look lively, comfortable, photogenic, or authentic, then you're going to be invisible to them before they even get to read the menu. Today, visibility includes signals of genuine authenticity. The second thing to understand is that this generation values authenticity over corporate polish. And here's what I mean. See, Gen Z has grown up in a world of advertising overload. They can spot overly produced content almost immediately. They respond more to real staff. They respond to behind the scenes clips. They respond to casual energy. They respond to genuine personality. Now, that doesn't mean that you can be sloppy in your marketing and advertising campaigns. It just means that you need to be human. You need to be genuine. You need to demonstrate a level of authenticity as you design your marketing messages to this particular audience. And the nice thing about small independent restaurants is that they naturally have an advantage here if they use it. See, larger corporate chains, they struggle with authenticity. And in fact, in a lot of cases, they have to manufacture authenticity. And a lot of times it comes across for exactly what it is. It's made up. It's manufactured authenticity. It's just not real. But small, local, independent restaurants, they don't have this problem. They are authentic. They are real. So make sure that you leverage that when you develop your marketing campaigns and when you show up digitally. The next thing to understand about this particular generation is that experience matters more than portion size. And here's what I mean. See, older generations, they often evaluated the value of a restaurant by portion size, price per plate, or quantity. Gen Z looks at this a little bit different. They evaluate value through vibe, shareability, comfort, uniqueness, social context. These are things that they're much more willing to pay for. Things like atmosphere, aesthetics, energy, and a good, compelling, authentic story behind your restaurant's concept and behind the food. Now, fortunately, this should connect directly to your core value proposition, right? And you need to remember that when it comes to restaurants, people are not there to buy food. People go to restaurant to buy experiences. Gen Z simply makes that more obvious. The next thing to understand about Gen Z is that yes, they are price aware, but they are not necessarily price driven. See, Gen Z is financially cautious, and rightly so. They're dealing with student debt, they're grappling with high rent costs, economic uncertainty. But here's the nuance here with all of that: they won't necessarily choose the cheapest place automatically. They want to choose the place that feels worth their time and their hard earned money. That means that if you compete on price alone to try to attract this audience, it's not going to work. You're going to instead attract price shoppers, and that's a completely different audience altogether. The next thing to know is that Gen Z trusts peers over brands. Now, traditional advertising has less influence over this particular generation because they instead trust reviews, they trust comments, they trust influencers and creators, they trust their friends. They look at things like tagged photos, they look at things like real customer images and organic mentions of your restaurant. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that your visibility strategy must include real people interacting with your restaurant. It can't be all fictitious and made up content. And they're naturally resistant to polished brand messaging. The next point here is that convenience matters more than loyalty. Now, Gen Z, of course, they grew up with things like delivery apps and digital wallets and one click ordering, things that prior generations did not have. So, for them, having friction kills the decision making process. So if your website is outdated and clunky, or maybe your menu is hard to read or hard to understand, or the ordering process is confusing in any way, then they're just going to move on. Uh, for them, loyalty is just not something that's assumed. It's earned repeatedly through multiple interactions with your brand. So, what does this mean for smaller independent restaurants? Well, here's where it gets practical. If you want to resonate with Gen Z, then you're going to have to do a few things differently. Number one, you want to show the experience visually. You want to show short clips of busy moments, laughter in the restaurant, food plating, real atmosphere, things that signal authenticity and genuine connection with your diners. Number two, you want to highlight personality. You want to showcase maybe a little bit of information about the owners, the chefs, the staff, maybe even an origin story or some of the challenges that you've overcome with owning and running your restaurant down through the years. Maybe you even want to make sure that you share your family story. Maybe you have a signature recipe or several signature recipes. Without disclosing too much information, maybe you want to make sure that that story comes through in your marketing and advertising, especially when you communicate with this particular generation. Number three is that you want to make your value obvious, not cheap, but clear. And you want to be able to answer the question: why is your restaurant worth their time and their money? Number four, you want to make sure that you reduce friction wherever possible. That means that you want to have easy to read menus, easy to understand menus. You want to have clear pricing and smooth ordering. Even if you have to go through the order process yourself, just to make sure that there are no hiccups, bumps, or challenges along the way. Now, let's talk briefly about a couple things that you don't want to do. You certainly don't want to chase trends blindly. You don't want to be online copying the latest TikTok dances. You don't want to add random Instagrammable gimmicks to your marketing. And you certainly don't want to lower your prices just to try to compete with larger brands. Gen Z does not reward desperation, but they do reward clarity and transparency in your messaging. So let's take a step back and look at the big picture here. See, Gen Z did not change dining, but they have accelerated some of the existing shifts that were beginning to take hold in the restaurant industry. So, for example, they have accelerated the focus of visibility over reputation. They have accelerated the shift of focusing on the experience over the ingredients. They have accelerated the change of authenticity over corporate polish, and convenience over the assumption of loyalty. See, restaurants that adapt to these changes are going to grow alongside this generation. Restaurants that continue to rely on old habits, they're going to start aging out over the next few years. Gen Z is not difficult, but they are different. And they're becoming a larger share of your customer base every single year, whether you realize it or not. And if you understand how they choose, then you don't need to chase them. You just need to become visible in their world. You need to show up properly where they are. In the post pandemic economy, it's important to remember just having good food is not good enough anymore. And if no one walks through the front door of your restaurant, then nothing else matters. I'm Donovan Garrett. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.